Welcome to Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Weldin. Today's story is part 2 of The Brilliant Firefly and the Purple Problem, an original story written for you by Daniel Hinds. This is a new standalone story in our Firefly series, which started with The Brilliant Firefly Reborn. You can find that story and the rest of the original trilogy in our feed, and the ebook is available on our Patreon and on Amazon. Just search for The Brilliant Firefly. Part 1 of this story was released earlier this week. Make sure you listen so you'll be caught up. Thanks! Enjoy the episode! The Brilliant Firefly and the Purple Problem, Part 2. Jillian Jays was lost in a dream, or at least it felt like a dream. The last thing she remembered was flying through the sky in pursuit of the strange shapeshifter that called itself Animali. There had been a purple blast, and then she wasn't sure. Now, everything was blurry and wide, like she was viewing the world through a weird fisheye lens. She tried to move her legs, and all 6 seemed okay. Wait, 6? That wasn't right. She lit up her rear, and the steady yellow-green glow was comforting. Well, that seemed wrong, too. What was going on? "Jill!" came a sound that was somehow familiar. It vibrated through her antennae. Not ears? "Jill, it's Specs. Just hold tight. You'll be back soon." "How long will it take?" came a strange growl. It sounded deep and mean, and it made Jill want to fly away. She flexed her wings, and they hummed as she began to flutter them. "The cops turned back after about an hour," the familiar voice said. "Should be any second." Jill felt herself start to melt and stretch. It didn't hurt, but it itched something terrible. It reminded her of the summer she had run away to sleep in the woods and gotten poison ivy all over her thorax. No, wait, her back? "My back!" Jill thought as her body flashed purple and sprang to normal. "My back!" she said aloud. "You're back!" Specs agreed, confused but happy to see her. He wrapped Jill in a big hug, and she hugged him right back, enjoying the feeling of having arms again. "What happened?" Jill asked. "Last thing I remember, did I get turned into a firefly?" "Sure did," said Werebear, coming back over with a bottle of Gatorade. "Here, drink this. Transforming messes with your electrolytes. I should know." "Thanks," Jill said, realizing she felt weak, her throat dry and brittle as an old circuit board. She popped the top and chugged the drink down in a few long gulps. "So what happened?" "It's my fault," Specs wailed. "I was distracted by XX Slayer 43X and my stupid game. If I had been paying more attention, I never would have let that happen." "Oh, it's okay, buddy," Jill said. "I'm back now, so don't get your antennae in a twist." She nudged her friend. "See? Little bug humor there for ya." Specs blinked back tears and smiled at his friend. "Thanks, Jill. Well, once Animali transformed you, the suit reported in as having no pilot. I figured she'd transformed you, so I remotely piloted you back to the lighthouse." Jill looked around and saw she was indeed sitting on one of the medical tables at their headquarters. The lighthouse was the top floor of a skyscraper, with one of its glass walls bowed outwards like the prow of a ship, overlooking all of Giga City. It had been her father's lab when he was working on the Firefly armor with her grandfather. Now it was home to Jill and her mom and Specs, and the headquarters for the Giga City Guardians, too. "He told me what happened, and I came back as fast as I could," Werebear added. He was still in his grizzly form, but then again, he almost always was. "This shapeshifter seems like she was born with the ability, like I was." Jill nodded. It had definitely seemed like a power, and not some kind of technology. "I figured we could work out some kind of way to shield you for next time. Werebear got hit, and it only lasted a minute, not an hour. We think we can work out some kind of vaccine to keep you safe, at least in the short run." He took a small blood test tab and waved it in front of Jill. "We should get a sample while whatever she did to you is still fresh in your system." "Sounds good," Jill said, and then yawned loudly, barely reacting as Specs jabbed her with the little needle and bustled the sample away. A glance at the clock showed her it was nearly 2 in the morning. But first, a good night's sleep. This Firefly is burnt out. The others agreed, and they all went to bed. The next morning, the 3 of them gathered together in the lab. Werebear was generous enough to provide several additional blood samples, and Jill and Specs got to work. A little later, Jill's mom, Anne, came in and took over. She was an ER doctor, a medical genius, and Jill's personal hero. Jill was an unmatched engineer, Specs was a whiz with computers, but Anne's medical knowledge was up there with any mad scientist, especially since she was the one who had to treat all of their experiments when they went terribly wrong. "Specs, get me an antigen readout," she said. "Jill, you're on capillary electrophoresis. Werebear, have another sugar cookie, honey. You're giving us a lot of blood, and I don't want you getting dizzy when you're out there fighting crime."
Yes, ma'am,"
the 3 chorused, and they got to work. It took the better part of 2 days and a few favors called in from Anne's friends at the lab, but in the end, they managed to synthesize a vaccine. Jill looked at the vial of purple, cloudy liquid and then smiled up at her mom. "You really think this'll work?" she asked. "As far as I can tell," her mom said. "We won't know for sure until we can test it on a shapeshifter." They looked at each other and then turned to Werebear. Hey, buddy," Jill said.
"I'm a bear, not a guinea pig," he said quickly. "And I don't want my powers cured."
"It would not be permanent," Anne said quickly. "We just need to see how long it lasts." The shaggy hero looked from Jill to her mother and then threw up his hands.
"Fine, but if this breaks my powers, you're building me a giant bear mech suit with missiles for claws and, laser eyes."
"Deal," Jill said, and Anne loaded some of the vaccine in a small needle. It bent in half against Werebear's super tough skin, so she had to get a thicker needle made for tranquilizing elephants. This one went in with a little effort, and the purple liquid shot into his arm. "How will we know if it works?" Jill asked.
I can feel it working," Werebear said. I can't hold my beast form any longer."
He grunted and started to shrink. Jill and Anne watched in awe as the massive hero scaled down to a normal-sized man, albeit still one with a shaggy head of hair and a full black beard. "Wow," Jill said. "It's like a werewolf movie in reverse."
"I'm glad you're enjoying it,"
Werebear said, swimming in a costume many sizes too big for him.
"I feel like a kid in my dad's clothes."
They started a timer and sat together for a bit, watching the clock anxiously. After a while, Werebear let out a long grunt and staggered to his feet.
"It's wearing off," he said. I'm back, baby," he finished, his voice twisting to his shaggy growl as he transformed back into the giant bear beast.
Anne looked at the timer. "All right, 10 minutes, give or take a bit for your different biology," she said to Jill. "Will that be long enough?" "It'll have to be," Jill said. "Thanks, Werebear. Couldn't have done it without you."
"No problem, kid," he said and leaned in close. "Just make sure you don't mention the koala thing, yeah?"
"You got it," Jill said. "By the way, I got this new eucalyptus shampoo, just in case you're interested." He glared at her, and then they both burst out laughing. Anne looked confused. "Superheroes," she said, and she threw up her hands and walked away. The next night, Jill and Specs were working on some homework in the lighthouse when the sirens gave a whoop and the computer screens projected onto the prow window flashed red. "What's the alert?" Jill yelled to Specs as she ran for the Firefly armor. Her friend skidded his computer chair over to the main terminal and his fingers flew across the keys. "We have a break-in at the Rockingham Mall," he said. "Police reports are saying it's a purple dinosaur. The mall's closed and the guards have gotten out. They're just waiting for super assistance." "That's gotta be our shifter," Jill said, remembering the purple pterodactyl. "I hope this vaccine works." She stepped up to the Firefly armor, standing in its tube. A spiderweb of light swept over her body, recognizing her. Then, like the inexorable gears of a ticking clock, Like a flower blooming in fast motion, the suit unfolded like an origami trick, inviting her forward. Once again, Jillian Jays stepped into the Firefly. A second later, the roof of the lighthouse irised open and Jill burst into the air in a wash of yellow light. Even after all these months, there was still nothing better than the feeling of launching into the sky, fighting against gravity and winning, all of Giga City sprawling out beneath her like a twinkling mirage in a desert of velvet night. Her heads-up display plotted a course to the mall, showing a flight path and air traffic in faint lines on her visor. "ETA 3 minutes, Jill said. The suit could fly faster, but if she broke the sound barrier, she'd shatter windows across the city, so it was better to keep it subsonic. "Roger," said Specs. "I got..." "Uh-oh." "What is it? Is it the mall?" "No, it's our general system inbox. We just got an anonymous message." "Well, what does it say?" asked Jill, swooping around an apartment tower to the cheers of a group having a barbecue on its roof. "It says, 'You locked me up, now I'm coming for you.'" "Well," said Jill, "that's pleasantly ominous. Can you track it back to its source?" "On it," came Specs' voice in her ear, followed by the clattering of keys. Jill slowed down as she saw the flashing lights of emergency responders in a half moon around the mall's entrance. The doors and much of the walls were smashed to rubble, a trail of general destruction leading deeper into the cavernous mall. "At the mall now," she whispered to Specs. "Heading in." "I got Werebear, Crimson Cannonball, and Grimchurch on the line," he replied. "They want to know if they should come back you up." Jill thought about it for a minute, chewing her lip. "Tell them to hang back," she said finally. "I only have 1 dose of vaccine in my suit, and I don't want them getting transformed into frogs and then squished or something." "Werebear won't be happy about that," Specs replied. "Then I'm glad you're the one who has to tell him," Jill said with a smile. She killed her thruster and clanged to the ground in front of the mall entrance. The police gave a cheer as she headed into the building. At least this time, the lights were on. "Should you take that vaccine now?" Specs asked. "Not yet," Jill said. "If I only have 10 minutes, I want to wait until I find Anna Molly." She looked around the mall. No sign of the shifter herself, but there was a clear path of destruction to follow. Storefronts were smashed, railings crumpled, and merchandise strewn about like a tornado had hit. Any luck tracking down that threat? Jill was more worried about that than she was letting on. A supervillain with a vendetta was the last thing that they needed right now. "Running a trace," Specs said. "And I have the lighthouse on high alert. The Tower Twins are down in the lobby, and Cannonball is doing a flyby." "Sounds good," Jill said. And oh no! Jill rounded a corner, and there, standing so tall its head brushed the 3-story glass ceiling, was Anna Molly, in the form of a hulking, purple Tyrannosaurus Rex. Her giant jaws were crunching into the wall between a toy store and a jeweler, spilling dolls and dice and gold onto the mall's tile floor. As Jill watched, she sniffed the air and then turned, her beady eyes locking onto Firefly. Jill said, looking up at the giant purple dinosaur. "Barney?" The beast roared in response, shaking the floor and spraying hot spittle onto Jill's visor. "Guess not," Jill said, triggering her thruster and taking to the air as the giant jaws snapped beneath her feet. "Specs, I have contact. She's hitting the jewelry store in the mall. I'm injecting the vaccine now." She triggered a button on her gauntlet and felt a warm sting in her arm as her suit delivered the shot. A small timer blinked to life in the bottom right of her vision, reading 10 minutes and counting down. "I'm watching," Specs said. "And the trace is coming back now. I'll know who sent that threat in just a minute." Jill acknowledged him with a grunt and clenched her fists. She shot flashing blasts of energy at the T-Rex as it stomped and roared after her. The giant jaws snapped at her again and again, closing with ugly, wet thunderclaps. There wasn't a lot of room to fly, but Jill was agile enough to stay 1 step ahead. "Those sting me!" The T-Rex stopped to roar.
Why do you sting Animali?
Jill stopped too, hovering nearby. Animali, let's slow down, she said to the monster. That's your name, right?
It's my super name,
the T-Rex roared.
And your name is Lunch!
It charged forward, mouth open and gaping like a subway tunnel. A flash of purple light surprised Jill, shooting from the shifter's tail and slashing into her armor. For a second, she felt nausea like she might hurl, but it passed.
Jill, did you get hit?
Came Spex's panicked voice in her ear. It got me, but the vaccine worked, Jill said, checking her readout. 9 minutes left. Remind me to hug my mom. She let loose a double-fisted blaster down the T-Rex's throat. The dinosaur roared again and melted away, clanging into a slinking purple panther. The big cat howled and leapt at her, colliding in air, claws scratching against the metal of her armor, fangs trying to bite into her helmet. Jill shook her free with a blast of yellow light, just as a sizzle of purple washed over her vision. They came apart, both panting in the rubble.
You're not changing, the panther growled. Why do you not change?
Sorry to disappoint, Animali, Jill said. You ready to surrender now? The panther yowled and pounced at her again. Jill kicked on her thruster and dodged narrowly. I got the trace back, Specs said. And? Jill asked, dodging another leaping attack. You're not gonna like it, Specs said. Oh, because the rest of my day is going so well? Jill crashed into the floor and fired back, sliding away as the panther stretched into an elephant and tried to stampede over her. It was XX Slayer 43X, Specs said weakly. He didn't get into our system, he just tracked my gamer ID. He was only trying to get me banned from the game. Awesome! Great use of time, Jill said, flying up as the elephant shifted into a chomping alligator. So it's not a real threat. No, Specs said, obviously embarrassed. He's only like 9 years old, so.
Come get eat like Cheerio, Bugman,
Animali Alligator bellowed. That's just great, Specs, Jill said. You know, you're really For the first time, she really listened to what Animali was saying, and then she looked at the shattered toy store next to the jeweler's. A genius! You're a genius, Specs.
I don't follow.
That bank Animali robbed, she said. Check with the police and find out what she actually stole.
On it,
Specs said, hammering at the keys. Jill blasted away a few tentacles as the alligator turned to a giant purple octopus and splashed into the mall fountain, spraying tepid water and coins in every direction.
Wow, Specs said. Nothing was stolen from the bank. Just some money destroyed in the rubble. But you saw her leave with a duffel bag.
I sure did, Jill agreed. Another purple blast washed over her, and she saw that her vaccine timer was down to 1 minute. Had they been fighting that long? It was time to end this. Animali, she called, landing away from the flailing octopus tentacles. Just stop for a minute. The purple octopus splashed into the water, and Animali emerged as a 20-foot-long purple anaconda, coil after coil slithering onto the tile.
Why stop? She hollered. You keep getting in my way. Just leave me alone.
I'm sorry, I am, Jill said, holding up her hands. She let the anaconda slither around her in a wide loop. The vaccine counter ticked down to 30 seconds. I didn't understand before, but now I do.
What do you understand?
Animali asked, her serpentine face dark and suspicious as a storm. You're not here for the jewelry, are you? Jill asked. You're here for the toys, right? What toy did you want? The purple anaconda's face darkened, its coils tightening around Jill. For a moment, Jill thought she had guessed wrong, but then the snake's face raised to look her eye to eye.
Animali wanted the dream house for her dolls, she said, and she sounded almost sulky. Molly never have dream house. Not for her dolls, not in real life.
Jill kept her hands up as the vaccine counter ticked down to 0. Specs was shouting a warning in her ear, but she muted him. And at the bank, you were never after the money.
Bank?
Molly said, confused.
No bank. Candy store. Lots of chocolate caramel bars. Chocolate caramel is Molly's favorite.
It's okay, Jill said softly. On faith, she triggered a jaw switch, and the Firefly visor slid up and away, showing her friendly face and messy hair. I'm on your side now. You can tell me.
No more sting me?
No more sting you, Jill agreed. I'll even buy you that dream house.
Really?
The purple anaconda said.
Really promise?
Really promise, Jill agreed.
I like to turn to a mouse and eat chocolate caramel,
Molly said with a shy smile.
It'll last a long time that way.
That's smart, Jill said with a smile. You're a smart girl, aren't you? Especially seeing you're only, 6 years old?
5,
Molly said, and as Jill watched, the purple snake melted and shifted into a little girl, one with bright purple hair, lavender skin, and glowing violet eyes. I'm this many, the little girl added, holding up 5 grubby fingers. Wow, that's great, Jill said, and took the girl's hand gently in her own. Now come on, let's go get you that dream house. Yay! Molly cheered, and together they climbed over the rubble and into the toy store. That night, they had a sleepover at the lighthouse as the authorities tried to find where Molly had run from. It turned out she had been living in a foster home when her powers had unexpectedly appeared. Her new powers had frightened her, and she thought that she might get in trouble when they were discovered, so she had run away. There had been a search, but no one connected the missing little girl with the giant purple thief running rampage on Giga City. Jill pulled some strings, and little Molly, which turned out to be Molly's real name, got a new home. She was given a room at Senora Sun's School for Stupendous Students, where she learned to control her powers with other super kids like herself. It was a nice room, all done up with purple and dinosaurs, and Molly was very happy there. She even got to bring her new dollhouse. The end. Thanks for listening.